Good morning, or good evening, or good night, or good middle of the night, wherever you may be today. We're glad that you are here with us. I'll just wait for the folks here to populate in another minute, and we will get right started. We have Kristen on our team, and Shannon and Cheryl on the chats. If you see those names pop up, they're helping us facilitate today. Anna, good morning. Wait another 20 or 30 seconds here, and then we'll get going. Hello, Maria Claudia. Good morning. So as you're coming in here this morning, as we have people coming in, I have a question for you, and thank you for putting this in the chat already. We're always curious, where are you listening and watching from today? Where in the world are you visiting with us today? St. Louis, awesome. Jersey, hello, hello. And I know we've got some people outside of the US as well. Thank you, Kim, Albert, Puerto Rico, Minnesota. Hello, hello, Eva. Great. Netherlands. Hello, hello. Fantastic. Well, it never ceases to amaze us, and we're just so thrilled that this series, which we started about 5 years ago, has been able to attract such fantastic guests. And we bring this and bring it back, and we are bringing this series back now because of the excellent engagement. We use this to have a series of conversations with amazing people to learn about different things on leadership and discuss things. We may not always have all the answers, but we want to dig into some things that are really kind of hard and messy with the great people who are within the orbit of the Center for Leadership. My name is Nathan Hiller. I'm executive director at the Center for Leadership. I'm a professor at FIU, also in the College of Business. And I like to call myself a leadership geek. I'm passionate about all things leadership. And that is a great intro also then to our guest, who is also a leadership geek. Christian, if I can call you that, I mean it in a loving way. Um, Christian brings really a remarkable blend of leadership experiences, from serving as a Marine Corps sergeant to now advising many Fortune 500 companies and global companies. He's always jetting all over the world at ADP. There, he helps transform research, plays a really interesting role in transforming research that ADP has, and the amazing data set that they have about the world of work, into practical, actionable insights, and finds himself really as a trusted advisor to C-suite executives and thinking about strategy and human capital strategy, but not just in the human capital strategy. So his work centers really on a critical question: how do we turn talent into performance at the team, at the organizational, and really even think about this at a more macro global level? He's widely respected. He's often a keynote speaker, and we're really fortunate to have him with us here today. And I'll say one more thing about him. He is also a board member at the FIU Center for Leadership on our board of advisors. We're thrilled to have him there. He joined about, I guess, a year and a half or so ago. And your work across industries and domains really does span, as I foreshadowed just a minute ago, IT to strategy to finance. So you are seeing not only different industries and different countries, but you're seeing different domains within the organization, right? So you not only go across different organizations, but you work in various pieces across those organizations. So can you tell me, how does that all bridge together?
Definitely. Well, first and foremost, thank you for having me. Phenomenal introduction. I wish I could have you introduce me everywhere that I go. So again, thank you so much. Very humbled by everything that you said, and just the opportunity to be able to have this conversation with you. All of the work that I get to do with the Center for Leadership is amazing, and the opportunity to speak to everybody who's taken the time to join and listen to this conversation. Um, So in regards to what you just described, yeah, 100%. I'll share a little bit more context around what that looks like, but specifically, the area of expertise that I bring is twofold. Originally, when I first started my advising role, my area of expertise was leadership. So it was exclusively leadership. That's what I was known for. That's what I was being brought in for. I had an opportunity. As you mentioned, my career began in the military. And in the military, as you can imagine, there's so many different ways to explain it, but leadership means everything. Both as an individual contributor, and then when you do receive that awesome responsibility of becoming a leader and you understand what that entails. And then you also see the power of leadership, how it could influence in an incredibly positive or potentially a very damaging way, the not just results, but people's lives and what they end up doing in their careers or in a particular engagement. So when I brought that over to the private sector, we started to kind of think about how can we scale leadership excellence within an organization. I had an opportunity at the time to partner with a gentleman named Marcus Buckingham, who's very well known as a researcher, author, incredible speaker, but at heart, he's a data scientist that studies excellence at work. Whenever you
So
study,
some of you may be familiar with some of his well-known. Do you want to just talk a little bit about because they may know it, they may know him without knowing him, right?
absolutely. So Marcus Buckingham, it's along with Don Clifton, who founded the Gallup organization, what are widely considered to be the godfathers of the strengths-based approach to leadership. Strengths-based approach to leadership, it's so emotive and it connects with people on such a personal level. But what a lot of people lose sight of it is that it isn't a philosophy, it's actually a finding. And what happened was that back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, Gallup organization conducted a study to try to understand what is the common denominator when individuals achieve the highest levels of excellence in their individual careers. And after studying, as you can imagine, thousands and thousands of data points, interviews, and so forth, there was a book that was published in the late 90s called First Break All the Rules by Marcus Buckingham. And it really started to kind of put all of those things together for all of us that are leadership geeks, as you said. And basically, what it found was that those individuals that excel at the individual level, at the leadership level, or at the collective level are the ones that are highly aware of their strengths and intentionally take those strengths and volunteer them to create value. So that's who I was able to partner with. And it really changed I shouldn't say it changed, it complemented my view on the context of leadership. Because what we were able to bring to the conversation was much more of a research data-based approach. And then when we brought that to the world of business, and after we worked at a startup, we built the startup. The startup was acquired by ADP. After ADP acquired the startup, Marcus went on to found the People in Performance practice inside of ADP's Research Institute. And I'll explain a little bit more about why that substance really matters. But what we were able to do is bring the context of leadership and the understanding of what drives humans to perform at work and then align it with all of that macroeconomic data that informs organizations and how they can increase their performance. And performance could be defined by an organization depending on the industry that they're in. So that's kind of how all of these functions start to kind of bridge together. Because at the end of the day, again, I'll explain in a lot more detail how they're all interrelated. They're not always as collaborative as they should be, but all of these functions really do come together to be able to drive the success of any given organization forward.
That's awesome. And I think that might be a nice segue. I think you have a few, I don't know if you have slides for us, but you have a few
Yeah.
things that you kind of wanted to touch on. I'll let you dig right into it. And just so everyone knows here, the order of how we will proceed is that Christian has some thoughts that he's going to share. We'll have a bit of a dialogue, but we're also going to be dialoguing with you. So if you have questions as things come up, we'll monitor it as best we can. We can't necessarily get to all of them, but we want this to be a bit of a dynamic experience. So it's not going to just be one way speaking for the whole time. So with that, Christian, I'll turn it over to you to share some seeding thoughts to us.
Thank you. Absolutely. Yeah, these are just a couple of thoughts to kind of frame the conversation. I was asked to kind of share like what's happening, what's got your attention right now, what are you seeing, and how could that be relevant to our audience? So as I start to share a couple of things, I'll start off with just again giving you the context about why not just me, but like why the work we're doing is really relevant to what's going on. So when you look at ADP itself, ADP is very well known, I would say, by many of you as a human capital management organization that offers products and solutions. The thing that isn't always as well known, however, is the fact that because of their breadth and scope, they've been around for 75 years, they operate all over the world, they have 1.2 million clients, which sounds like a lot. But when you start to consider the fact that each one of those clients is an organization, you start to realize how much of the world of work that represents. So what you're seeing here is a representation of the data that ADP has on people at work. We have the biggest, most robust, and accurate data set on people at work. And again, starting with at the individual level, at the team level, then at the organizational level, and it gives us a really good insight into the economy. Right now, as you all know, the National Employment Report was released, which always creates a lot of headlines. And I always like using that as an example because it explains why this matters. Why is this tangible? It isn't just something that sounds interesting. So one of the common terms that you always hear is that whenever the ADP report comes out, Wall Street, CNBC, all of these financial outlets start talking about, did we get it right on the street or not? And typically you'll have two types of reports. You'll have the government report that comes out, and then you have the ADP report. The government report is important, but the ADP report is definitive. Why is it definitive? Because the BLS, which is the one that, released by the Department of Labor, is a survey, meaning that they go and they ask organizations, how many people did you hire? How many people did you let go? ADP doesn't ask anybody any questions. They simply count. They take all of this data and they count and they go, who was hired? Who was let go? What salaries are they being paid? Where are they? Etc. So the value of that insight is so important because it really gives us a point of reference about where we're at, where we're coming from, and where we're going. So, as Nathan said, my job is to take the insights that an incredibly talented team inside of our research organization, full of microeconomists, psychometricians, statisticians. They're reviewing that and they're identifying trends and they're identifying what they're finding in terms of what it means, what's happening, why is it happening, and then how should that inform us? So then I have a really, again, incredible team whose job is to take those insights and then turn them into something that's useful to organizations. And why is all of this important right now? Like, what environment are we all living in, both as leaders and organizations or as individual contributors? So, as you all know, right now, there's a tremendous amount of economic pressure. There's just a lot of dynamism. There's always dynamism in the economy, but right now it feels like there's a significant economic pressure being placed on organizations. There is a new mandate to do more with less, continue to grow, and produce more. At the same time, there is rapid technological innovation. We talk about it as the age of AI, but there's so many things that are happening that are influencing our capacity to create value that organizations and the leaders of those organizations have to be up to date on not just their business, but how that technology is either impacting or should be impacting their capacity for growth. And then finally, which is the area that I'm kind of living in, which is really exciting, is that as we understand the nature of humans at work and their capacity to create value, that science is starting to inform business strategy. So a lot of the things that we've traditionally known, again, leader development being one of them, where we innately know this is a good thing to do. We want to invest and take knowledge and science and understanding of what makes leaders better and put it inside of organizations and use it to create more value. What's happening now is that this is now becoming much more scientific and innate, and it's being incorporated into the core functions of organizations. So, what does it look like? What is the environment that we're seeing right now inside of leadership teams? This is kind of like the net new observation that I'd like to bring. Some of it might feel like it's a little bit obvious, but as I engage with organizations all over the world and with different industries, I keep seeing this come up as a common denominator. And that is the fact that the traditional C-suite has been organized again to meet the needs of a business and make sure that we have the right disciplines inside of an organization to address key areas. I've picked four functions that are really right now starting to be tasked with forming the success of an organization. And what you'll note is that the leadership of those functions is what is going to determine an organization's readiness to meet the challenges of the moment and then their capacity to be able to create value in the future. So we begin again with the HR function. The HR function is tasked with managing and optimizing an organization's human capital, the people that they employ and how they deploy them to create value. The challenge there sometimes is that they don't always have visibility into how the work gets done, nor do they have a deep understanding of how technology can enhance how humans can perform that work. The other function then comes in naturally would be IT. And IT's traditionally always been focused on what systems do we have, how do we integrate them, and how do we deploy them so that people can use them effectively to achieve their intended goals. The challenge there sometimes, though, is that they tend to measure success by adoption and have not traditionally measured success by the capacity to create value in
Yeah,
terms of business perspective. Yes.
Christian, these are really interesting points, right? So we're for those of us who are used to human capital sort of arguments, one of the challenges has been that a lot of folks in that space don't understand the strategy, they don't understand the operations, they don't understand the business, right? So they're
Mhm.
used to thinking about, their metrics, and those are important, some of those pieces, but it really needs to tie in. And this IT point, is really interesting too. So, did we get this product? Did we get this new software rolled out? Did we have any glitches? Did we have downtime? Right? So that's what you're talking about. Is that correct?
Yes, and it's interesting because
Historically, that's what was.
historically,
Yeah.
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 What I did something recently over the last 6 to 8 months, and is I started to take invitations to attend CIO conferences, and then I was invited to do roundtables, and I had conversations with countless CIOs that are at this moment in time that I just described. And what I hear from them in a very humble but urgent way is our function is evolving, and what's expected of us is changing, and we need to be able to rise to the occasion. So I'll explain in a little bit how that looks like for that function, but what you're describing is spot on. So the other two functions that I bring up that again support the foundation of an organization's success would be the operations function. And the operations function is tasked with efficiency and execution of the work itself. The challenge sometimes is that, again, if you're working on executing and creating value in the present, they don't necessarily have insights into either science or techniques or how we can improve that in the future, or necessarily which technology can enable that. And then the last piece, which is all of our favorite piece, is the finance function. And the finance functions are the stewards of our resources. They ensure that the organization has financial discipline, efficiency, and they're constantly focused on delivering shareholder value. The challenge here is an interesting one, is because from a human capital perspective, traditionally, people or total cost of a workforce has been seen as an expense, not necessarily your growth lever, which is critical in our as far as I believe right now. When we hear the topic of AI and we hear the topic of all the advancements in technology, the one thing that seems to permeate not just the media landscape in terms of what we discuss, but frankly, boardroom conversations, is the fact that advancements in technology will reduce the need for humans to create value because human capital, I mean, I'm sorry, technology will replace that value. The
Hmm.
reality, though, is that what we've been finding when we actually start to study present, past, and potential future value is that human capital is not a sunk expense. When it is invested in intelligently, it actually is a growth lever, meaning that all of these things that we talk about that are incredibly beneficial, like engagement, like learning and development, specifically leader development, when they're done effectively, if you measure their output accordingly, you're actually going to create exponential value for an
So,
organization.
I mean, this is huge, right? This is massive because um, so if we back up the narrative with a lot of companies say, well, people are our greatest asset, but the people who have the most power often in organizations are the finance people. And historically, the finance people are like, would say under their breath, that's not, no, come on. Like that isn't really true. These people are more of an expense rather than asset. Okay, so you're saying then, okay, so but maybe there is some value in this. And then how does that even then diminish more in the context of AI? Though, because you don't need people to do things, right? So finance people might naturally say, this is an opportunity for us to cut more, and you are finding actual real data, and
Correct.
you are seeing that investments in human capital in the context of AI are paying dividends.
Yes. So it's
Massive.
massive, massive. I mean, it's because there's a couple of things, and I've been thinking about this quite a bit. Um, as we consume insight and media pertaining to AI and its impact that it will have in the world of work, we are getting caught up by the fantastic. What again, total replacement of the human in the context of work. We're going to be doing things, and I'm not saying that those things either are not possible or that they might not be the future,
Yep.
but they're
Yep.
not as imminent as they make it out to be, or we feel it because there's so much
Hmm.
echoing coming out about what's happening, what will happen. When I work with these organizations and I'm on the ground floor with these C-suites of these large organizations working in a variety of different industries, that's not where they are. Where they are, however, is they are looking at what will that entail. So if I just unpack it one more a little bit, I want to highlight those two functions because those two functions are the ones that are really at the front line of this conversation. So and that being the HR and the IT function. Here's how they're changing. And it didn't happen today. For the HR function, it's been happening for a little bit over a decade, but the pandemic really accelerated it. And it is the fact that that function was looked at really traditionally to manage compliance and risk. Make sure people get paid, make sure our taxes are filed, make sure the organization is in compliance. And what's happening now is that, again, as advances in our understanding of people and work and humans' capacity to create value is becoming much more intelligent and tangible, they're being looked at as what are you doing to give us a competitive advantage vis-a-vis our human capital? That's really cool, really exciting, but it is a massive shift in the way that that function has traditionally been looked at, the way that it's formed itself, and the way that the people that run them have traditionally operated. At almost the same time, the IT function has had that shift as well. I mentioned that I've been having these conversations with CIOs for some time. And from their perspective, the way that they would describe it is that a lot of times a big part of our job was filling out tickets. The business would tell us we want to procure this type of technology, go out there and make sure that we're using the right technology, make sure that it's all interconnected, make sure that it's secure, and then help us make sure that we can get it deployed and people to use it. It sounds obvious, but what's happening now is that we want you to do all of that, but we also need you to have a voice and, frankly, have a vision for how this technology is going to advance our success as a business. And that's a big ask, and it is very different from what they've traditionally been asked to do. So now, to your point, all of this is coming to a head with the world of finance because at the end, for the last several years, two things have been happening. Number one, on the IT side, they have been getting significantly larger budgets to start to explore AI and all of this technological advancements and how it can create value for the organization. So what happens inevitably is that right now, like as we speak, most organizations, particularly the ones that have been investing for a while, they're being asked to show a return. What does that return look like? And what we're finding is that a lot of the low-hanging fruit from an IT perspective to show a return in AI investment is productivity of employees, right? So if I'm investing in AI functionality and I'm using it to help humans perform their work quicker, better, and faster, that's where the quote unquote low-hanging fruit from an ROI perspective lies.
Yep.
So when they come back and they demonstrate, we've increased productivity in the organization by 15%. We've reduced the amount of hours on any given task by X amount. The immediate question comes back to the HR department. Are you adjusting our staffing ratios accordingly?
Yep.
Right? So the implication is this, Nathan. If you're creating more capacity because human capital is a sunk cost, you need to reduce the necessity for that human capital by the capacity that was created. And that's what we're hearing, the tsunami of potential layoffs in the coming years, et cetera,
Mhm.
et cetera. And this is a paradigm that I'm frankly really excited about evangelizing. It's that that is not the only option. And you hit the nail on the hammer. And here's where if you don't mind, I'll share something that might be a little bit controversial or it might be go against popular belief. And I'm kidding. One thing that I can say to give faith in humanity in humanity is that every C-suite, every senior leadership team that I've engaged with, and it's again many, 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 many over the last several years, they're all inherently good human beings. They are good people that care about other humans. And again, I say it in jest, but it's not like the perception that we typically have at large, not by any given individual, but at large, is that the C-suites of large organizations, all they care about is profits, and they want to reduce profits at all costs. I mean, reduce costs at all costs to create profits, even if it's at the cost of humans. And frankly, there's a double-edged sword to that. Number one, these are good human beings that want to create good outcomes for humans, whether it's their employees or their customers. The challenge is you have to make it make sense. I am not going to be able to help my people at the expense of a business because if not, then that is the entire mandate behind my job. So here is what we're finding. what is the alternate path? What is the off ramp that we can give organizations for them to explore and execute on that reinvests that capacity that's being created in humans? And it isn't, frankly, just being honest, going to be do it because it's the right thing to do. It has to be, and it can be, do it because it is the thing that is going to create what you are being pressured for. Constant year over year revenue and productivity growth. So what we're looking at here is a linkage model between human capital investments that go into people, and then ultimately the financial impact of an organization. What we're starting to see now, what you described that we're seeing in organizations that are getting it right, is that across the board, most organizations that I come across are doing a really good job in being stewards of their people. Where they're falling behind is in articulating the financial impact that those investments are having. So if I'm investing in recruiting, engagement, onboarding, or leadership, how is that creating a tangible, measurable, traceable over time impact on the metrics that matter most? So here's just a model of how they start to do that. From its inception, you start to look at what is the investment, and then you start to think about how does it impact the way that people work? What is the end impact that it has on your customer, your consumer, and then being able to connect it to the things that finance is tracking. What we've seen is that when we start to get that right, the numbers look incredibly good. What that means is that the more you invest in the human's ability to create value, the
Mhm.
more exponential value they create. Sounds obvious, right? It's like, yes,
Yeah, I mean, it sounds obvious, but I think it's really, I mean, it's, we're balancing here this tightrope because uh, we don't want to be Pollyanna-ish in that
exactly.
there are massive disruptions coming to the way organizations are even built from the ground up, and there's no doubt that it's hard to even think through so far ahead. But at the same time, some of the narrative, um, depending who you're listening to, you can be overwhelmed, and it can get so negative that you don't see these glimmers of hope. And I think so it's really interesting to see that the data is there suggesting, right, that you are seeing data from real organizations. You're seeing them track this in a way that is a little bit more hopeful than what a really negative narrative might be. Um, and I think that's mentally, I like your reaction to this. Mentally, I mean, this is really one of the challenges I think of leadership for the moment right now. So please give me your thoughts on this. That we have to be aware of the possibility that we just can't even really know what's coming 3 years from now because
100%.
the rate of change is happening so fast. And that we need to have some openness to this idea that we can explore and think about those ideas, but we can't get caught so far ahead that we're only just thinking about, oh, what if and doom and gloom. We need to be thinking about what's happening in the present, and what that also involves keeping our heads about us, right? So we need to kind of have this future focus and this idea that we can't know, but we also have to be recognizing that it isn't so hopeless in this sort of moment, and that for us to be able to adapt as leaders and to help our team adapt, that we need to be putting on a learning orientation, right? Like we need a learning orientation. And if we're only freaking out, if we're in crisis mode,
Hmm.
it's really hard to be in learning mode,
Yep, yep.
right? And so I mean, so what I like your thoughts on this sort of generally, and this idea that I think a lot of people are struggling right now because there's just a lot of disruption societally, and then we think about business and everything. It just everything is in a bit of a chaos, right? And it's hard to be in learning mode. And so I think really what's demanded of leaders right now is this uh, mental an ability to keep your head about you, um, and remain realistically positive, keep your attention focused on the things you can do, and try and see kind of what's next and how you can prepare while recognizing there's some ambiguity, right? Because we can't learn and adapt that we can't do it in the ways that we need to do if we're only just freaking out. So I don't know what you're hearing or what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah. Well, again, what I'm starting to see, and again, there's a reason why I picked the sequence of slides and information to share, is what I'm starting to create awareness of, again, inside of boardrooms, the people that are running these organizations, is that they don't just have one option. It isn't just reduce costs by reducing headcount. When you start to look at your people, the people inside of an organization as value creators and assume that they will continue to be your main value creators for this sustainable future, and you look at AI enhancements as their ability to accelerate the value that they're creating, when you create that extra capacity vis-a-vis productivity, you have two options. Yes, one option is to reduce your staffing, but the other option is to reinvest that extra capacity in humans' ability to create even more value. So
Hmm.
that is where and again, right now we're having a very generic conversation, but if we're having a conversation around a specific industry, this is the point where the leaders of that industry, whether it's the head of operations, the CEO, they would start telling me, oh, you mean like this? You mean like when you're talking in a healthcare environment, what a nurse can do and how she can maybe take more beds, or how we can offer additional services that we weren't offering before, how we can cycle patients through a particular area. That's where you start to see the innovation. And again, in the
Right.
context of this
Right.
conversation, the
So it's
whole
not just doing the same thing quicker, it's
correct.
actually also then leads to doing different things, right? And that's right, a key sort of the first order obvious effect is efficiency, and then the next one is sort of more strategic innovation or some of those pieces, right? Yeah.
If we take a step back, and now this is kind of where the conversation, the unscripted part of our session comes in. It is, I would say, if we, and again, I'm looking at the C-suite, looking at the people that are running organizations. If we start to look at the function of the humans in your organization as creating value, and then you scale that downward, and all of us as individuals, whether we're leaders or individual contributors, we look at our own function as creating value.
Hmm.
AI's role is not to replace us, it's to enhance our capacity to create value and then innovate on ways to, maybe to your point, create net new value that hasn't been identified. But if you look at that linkage model that I showed earlier, the value has to start with, where are we investing in humans? Let's just stick to the topic of leadership because this is what's probably most relevant to us and our audience. If we're going to invest in leader development programs that are designed to put leaders in a position where they're more confident, they're more knowledgeable, and have the capacity to execute on behalf of their teams and on behalf of their organizations, we innately feel like, okay, that's net positive. Let's invest in that. Now, how is that impacting the way people work? Is it getting them to work quicker, better, faster? Are they creating a better impression on the patients, on the customers? And then are we capturing the things that matter, whether it's profitability growth, productivity, lower in safety incidents? That's what we want to be able to do. So now when you create that almost black and white clarity on behalf of leadership at every level of the organization, you called it out. You start to take away a little bit of that paranoia, a little bit of that emotional fear of adopting technology, of what might be coming that might replace me. Because if your focus is on how are we creating net new value and we're leveraging advances in technology to do that, and most importantly, you capture its impact, we're looking at a completely different landscape. Again,
Mm-hmm.
it will vary by industry. I'm not saying that there aren't
Hmm.
industries where the need for human intervention could be diminished. Absolutely. So this conversation is absolutely going to vary depending on the industry that you're in, the type of work that you're doing. But
Hmm.
what I am really trying to advocate on behalf of is taking the human out of the loop should not be the end goal. Maximizing the human's impact on value creation wherever they lie in the loop is really what we should be focusing on.
Is I'm curious. I'm going to ask a question to our audience here, and I'm curious uh, in what ways they are using AI. Like, how are you using AI? And maybe some of you aren't really yet, and that's we expect there's be some variability. But I'm curious, and then I'm just going to lead into a conversation around AI use, like personal use and leadership development growth, which we've had a sort of a bit of an ongoing conversation on, Christian. I know you've been done some thinking about. So let me just land this question, if you can, for anyone listening, put in the chat what if you're using AI and what you are using it for. I always find this a curious question to ask people because I also learn about ways that it's being used that I hadn't ever thought of, that it couldn't before. It's just changing so fast. And it'll be a nice lead into thinking about that in the context of leadership development. And while we do this here, um, let me ask a side question, Christian, which is, are you seeing so productivity and profitability, or like we can think about different outcome measures of an organization, and just being more productive isn't one of them. I think implicit in what you're saying is you're sort of using the idea of productivity, but that doesn't always lead to more profitability, right? They're sort of different things, but so you can become more efficient, and maybe that leads to more productivity. But you also need to be doing smarter things and changing your strategy in order to be more or productive or effective in whatever ultimate way that is. So if we think about nonprofits, right, their sort of way they think about productivity isn't just efficiency.
Oh,
They think about
100%.
people served and other things like that, right? So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, the definition of quote unquote performance has to come from the organization themselves. And they have it. It isn't something that needs to be thought of. You start off by going, the board of directors of an organization is reviewing a fixed set of data for every company. So then what you need to do is kind of follow the breadcrumbs back to here are the things that success is measured on. Here is the work that creates that outcome. So to your point, it will be varied. I had a conversation yesterday with a CEO. We were having lunch, and I gave him an example that I thought was so basic, but at the same time really descriptive of this
Hmm.
dynamic. And it's the concept of onboarding. You and probably everybody in this audience understands the onboarding function inside of an organization and knows that it is very important, right?
Okay, so that is when, just to be clear, because I think some people may not know,
Okay,
right?
okay,
What is the
absolutely.
process when you bring someone on into your organization? What does that whole journey look like in the first kind of number of months from, their hiring to them actually showing up or virtually, for the first few weeks? Yeah.
So I've actually conducted this exercise live with several executive teams. And I will go having the conversation. If HR talks to you about onboarding and describes it exactly like you just did, everybody in the room goes, that's a very important function. And I turn to the finance leader and I go, what if that function was described differently? What if we talk about it and we measure it as speed to productivity? How quickly can we take a net new hire and provide them with the right experiences, training, and capabilities in order for them to start to produce value that you tangibly measure? How does that change your brain? How does your brain start to operate differently to the same thing that, again, Nathan, you very skillfully described? It's a complete paradigm shift because if you are able to measure time, speed to productivity and quantify how quickly and how effectively can I get a human prepared to create value, and then I can measure that over time, and then I can compare that against this different interventions, different tools. All of a sudden, this is a nice thing to do for people, and it's the right thing that we should be doing. It is a tangible, material thing that has a financial impact on the organization. So
Hmm.
that I think that's just a really good example of how we're not talking about different things. We're just describing them and measuring them in a different way.
That's great. That's great. And I see a number of answers to the question that I threw out around how people are using it. I see everything from data analysis to media generation, comparing documents, maybe in a legal setting or something else, to understanding different ways to investigate tone in their communication and other ways to communicate, of course, grammar and things like that. Other things is just sort of speed up basic task classes. So kind of really interesting to see the panoply of things. And I would guess that there's probably a number of people on who aren't using or maybe have just kind of started to think about it. I'd like your thoughts on this is something that, as you know, we're getting very interested in the Center for Leadership is how people might use AI as a partner for their leadership development. So do you want
Absolutely.
to talk about that, what you think? And I'd love to hear, let me simultaneously ask a question. Has anyone or how has anyone used it for skill development? And I'll throw it out just sort of more broadly, skill development or leadership development. Have you ever used it as a thought partner for having a difficult conversation or for trying to understand how you might learn a new skill and ways like that? Please put that in the chat. We'd love to hear this. So, Christian, give us your thoughts.
So again, this is assuming that organizations have a proprietary enterprise LLM, meaning that I've got my data secure and I can feed it my proprietary information on myself, my customers, and my employees and so forth. It's assuming
Yep.
that, right? I'm not advocating people that work for in organizations to bring in like a public version of ChatGPT and feed it confidential data. That's not good practice. But in organizations that I see that have a closed LLM, we're seeing some really cool things. And this is what I want us to really like feed our energy towards. It's innovation in these areas. So I'll give you two really quick examples. And again, this one was discussed yesterday. One is how we have AI functionality that can listen to conversations between your employees and your customers. They can listen to the conversations, they can understand and interpret tone, they can follow through sequencing. They called the first time, they called the second one, the resolution was done on the third time. All of these things are being listened to, they're being analyzed, and best practices are being formed. So what I'm seeing organizations do a really good job of is when they're capturing all of this customer sentiment analysis, combining it with the execution of the work by their employees, and then they're feeding it to leaders. And then inside of that same ecosystem, they're feeding the leaders either training that they developed around conflict resolution, around performance coaching, in some cases, even strengths. What are your strengths as a leader? What are the strengths of the person that you're speaking to? And then they create an environment where the leader has full context and visibility. Here are the engagements that they're having. Here's the patterns that we're seeing. Here's what excellence looks like. Here's areas of improvement. And here's how I can enhance your capacity to have a really productive and effective intervention. And the last thing I'll say around that, you can apply that to almost any customer service environment, but also any sales environment. Anybody that is engaging with the public, and you want to be able to capture what's working, what's not working, and how does a leader step in and provide more timely, more effective, and frankly, the irony of it is more human support because now I understand you better. I understand what's happening. I'm getting insight that allows me to be a better
Yeah.
leader when I show up.
Yeah, it's really incredible. And I think, ADP may be working on some additional tools. I know there's some other organizations better up, Valence, some other that have, and we've trialed them that are really fascinating that you can upload your personality assessments, and this is in a closed environment, right? So that doesn't go to feed training models or have a chance to get out. You can It can know who your direct reports are. You can feed performance evaluations of them or difficult things you have. It remembers all this in context. It knows your strategic goals, and it acts like a coach does. And actually, so you can just talk to it and say, "Hey, I've got this strategic presentation," and it'll say, "Oh, I remember, by the way, that you have this from a few weeks ago. Is this to your boss?" And it's really almost like a live person, and it's really incredible the way the technology is getting with this. And I think we were blown away when we trialed it. We were blown away when we trialed some of this technology. Um, what I and I think what is maybe more accessible to most people is they don't have a company that is supporting them in this way, where they have an internal model. So you don't want to upload proprietary things, and I saw, for example, someone said they had a director that they were coaching, and they said, let's practice this difficult conversation. Um, and so you could just do that with your free version of ChatGPT or Gemini, for example, right? Although they're getting more and more limited, if any of you are using the free versions, they're getting more and more limited because there's just the response is overwhelming and they just can't handle it from a server perspective. So they're limiting what you can ask, but you can kind of game out what you might do, and it can give you feedback. And I'm fascinated by this, and I see a few people have sort of said, "Hey, think of this as a thought partner, and you can challenge it." It's one of the things that we're working on here at the center is how can we help people using So without thinking about proprietary information that someone might feed, how can I just think of it as a coach, as someone that I can have conversations with about things that are happening that I might need to do leadership tasks, and I find that really fascinating. So if anyone has, please send us an email. And we'd love to hear about it or put it in the chat, ways that you are doing it. We're trying to collect some examples of the ways that people are doing this using free LLMs, and that sort of leads into this maybe another question. Holly asked a question: are you seeing automation of tasks within leadership? How are you seeing that?
Again, there is automation that's taking place, and the automation is really more on the on the back end office, right? How do I take the administrative burden off of leaders? What we are seeing, and again, the Research Institute just reported on it recently, is we are seeing a thinning out of the managerial class. There's levels that are being removed in a lot of organizations, and then what we just found is that team sizes are also shrinking.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean necessarily a company could still have the same number of employees, but they have smaller teams and they have
Yeah.
less levels of leadership. Now, that's something that I've seen.
Hmm.
But what
Hmm.
we are starting to see, because I really do want to address the point you just made, because the other thing I'm hearing a lot from people is we need more use cases. Give me more tangible examples of how I can apply insights. Because a lot of it, and you said something that really triggered it for me, it's like a lot of this amazing stuff sometimes is locked behind the firewall of a really well-funded organization. They've got all the bells and whistles, they've got all this stuff. How do I bring it to life in an organization that might not have that same reach, might not have that same access, but I want to be able to accomplish the same thing? And you kind of trigger like I don't want to limit people because of the data security and confidentiality of being able to access some of those. One that I found that was brilliant that could be accessible across the board because I've seen that use case show up in it several times was one of the things that we do, and this is again free for everyone, and I know you can share it. We provide a strengths assessment to individuals that want to better identify what do I look like when I'm at my best and how do I intentionally apply that. What I've seen some,
And I'm going to see if anyone wants to take that. Can we put that in the chat, Christian, or is that okay? Okay, so I'll see if someone on our team can find the link because I think we have it and put it in the chat. It's a great free tool that you might want to take advantage of. Sorry, go ahead. Yep.
no, please do. And again, it could apply to any tool, but it's a really good use case because what I've heard on several occasions individuals do is go, I am working with Nathan, and here's the context of the situation. And I don't have to say Nathan, I'm working with my director of finance, and here's the context of the situation. Here's what his strengths are. Let's just say he's a creator influencer, and I am a teacher influencer. These are role designations inside of that particular assessment. What recommendations would you give me in terms of how to be able to coach them on how to address the situation? You can
Yep.
take any assessment and do the same thing if your company uses it or if you have experience utilizing that one, you can go in and the LLM, non-private, will have access to them. They'll know what they mean. They'll know how to extract the right information and
Yep.
layer it over
Yep.
the context that you're prescribing. That is an out-of-the-box aid to help anybody be able to have a more effective conversation.
So I
Um,
love that. I just want to, that's really awesome, Christian. And so thank you for providing this link for folks. And what you could do, right, conceivably, is take your results. If you're not, I mean, this isn't private stuff. So you may not, maybe you're concerned, maybe you don't want to feed it into a sort of an LLM that may see, but maybe you don't care, right? I think a lot of people don't really care. Um, Especially if you have a paid version, it can remember you
oh
that
yeah,
is your those are your strengths as context. So the next time you go in and ask questions and ask for it as a thought partner, it can remember that these are your strengths and
yep,
actually help you play to that, right? So that you don't have to do that every time. And you could start to build what I'm really curious about is like, how can we help people start to build a profile with context and help them understand so that they can actually use these intangible ways. And so look out for this. I mean, it's an early phase. Maybe I shouldn't say this because but maybe sometimes putting it out there in the is motivates us to move a little bit faster. But I think there's some really cool opportunities related to, and this is creative destruction in some ways, right? Like, so some people might say, why are you doing this? I mean, isn't this, because some of what we do is provide organizations with leadership development, and we really help leaders develop, and we have to charge for that because there's a lot of expenses related to this. Why would we give away something for free? And I think that this is an era where um, those who are not interested in disrupting themselves are just going to be disrupted by others in ways that absolutely crushes them, right? So the way that I'm seeing this is we need to be on the forefront maybe of disrupting ourselves a little bit and figure out what that means down the road, but it's also the right thing to do. And I think this is maybe what is required at the moment for a lot of organizations to um, kill their golden goose, right? And they've sort of said this for a long time. People were saying this about Google forever. They said,
Yeah.
look, they're a search engine and they don't have anything else. And are they going to really be successful? Oh, well, it actually turns out they're on fire right now. Like, every day there's new announcements coming out about, they're designing chips now and they're making, so that's kind of the way that I'm thinking about it. Are you seeing people take that approach? Are you seeing leaders take that approach? Or
I'll be
what?
honest, no, no. Right now, I see a lot of anxiety, and I see a lot of anxiety, and I love the way that you kind of very, shared some of what could be in your own realm a source of anxiety. If I impart anything on any leader or anybody that's listening, it's number one, focus what you're doing not so much on the work itself. Like in your case, for example, delivering a leader workshop or a coaching engagement on the value. I am a value creator. My function is a value generating engine. My people, my teams, they're all. So then what you need to do is spark innovation on how do we create more value, more effective, more efficient, and do it through the lens of humans. That's what I would love to see people do more of. And doing it at the C level, doing it at the team leader level, it's take away the anxiety, dissect the job through as a means to create value, and then spark as many creative juices inside of you and your people to maximize that value.
Mm.
Then I love the idea that you were creating because that's the best idea. Develop a relationship with AI. Whether it's if it's in your work environment and you have a closed LLM, become best friends with it and start to engage with it, feed it information, use it. If you don't have one, it could be on your personal level or on a professional level. Pick one and start to engage with it. Obviously, be mindful of what you share with it, but let it understand your context, where you're at, and then start to use it. To me, it is really like a gym instrument. Like the more you use it, the better fine-tuned you get with it, the more results you're going to find from it. And that is the only advice that you can have in this environment. Again, unless maybe you're in the plumbing or one of the trades, maybe I don't have my creativity hasn't gotten there yet. But in most other environments, including the discipline of leading, there are so much opportunity for you to create innovation and maximize the value that you provide to many leaders, to one leader, or as a leader to a team.
That's awesome. And I really appreciate that. I have two questions as we wrap up here in the next couple minutes. The first is what you for there are a number, we have people from executives to students all over everything and anything in between. You are an FIU alum. Can you tell
I
us a
did.
little bit, maybe just briefly, a little bit about your journey? And then my last question for you is, what's getting you excited or intrigued right now that you're just starting to investigate, you're not even sure about, but like what's on kind of got you excited or intrigued right now?
Sure. So in terms of yeah, I am an FIU alum. And my journey was interesting because I was in the military and I had an opportunity through an engagement that was to a unit that I was assigned to go to school at night. And it was a good school. Some of these universities have phenomenal programs that allow service members to be able to go to some of the best schools in the country at night. They set up the facilities, like they make it doable. So one of these institutions did that, and I had really good grades. I've always been a little bit of a nerd, a geek. I love studying. I love knowledge. So I had good grades, and I was doing. So my last 6 months in the military, I sent essays to a lot of universities, like some very prestigious universities. And then the essays were all about why you need someone with my life experience as a part of your student body. And I got accepted to all six universities that I applied to. One of them was a very well-known private university in South Florida, and that's the one that I ended up taking because I had family roots, and then there was just an environment there that I wanted to live in, and I took it. At the end of my first semester, there was a problem with the free ride that I had been given because at the time there was a policy where your veterans benefits would have to contribute towards that, and it wasn't a good feeling. So I took a step back. I took a time off of school, and then I started to do research in the area, and I found that in my area, which I was going to study law, so I was studying political science at the time, the program was really good at FIU, so I went back to school at FIU. What I encountered when I went to FIU was that having had exposure to really prestigious and well-known private institutions, frankly, the academic quality at FIU was astounding. It was incredibly good. So I ended up doing my last 2 years of college at FIU, and it is something that I am incredibly proud of, being an FIU alum. Now that I'm on the board of the Center for Leadership, I'm so proud of all of the accomplishments and the recognition that the university has gotten. And I am absolutely a testament of not only the knowledge that you can acquire and how that could set you up for success in your career, but just in terms of the quality of the people that teach at FIU, the people that go to FIU, and then what it means for the community in terms of South Florida. So again, happy to at any moment.
That is not a paid endorsement, in
No,
case
not at all.
anyone.
Not,
I love it. I love
nor
it.
planned. I didn't know that question was
Yeah,
coming.
right, right, exactly, exactly.
In terms of what I'm most excited about is I kind of shared a little bit of it right now, is I am most excited about the reception that I am getting at the highest levels of corporate leadership in
Mhm.
terms of CFOs, CEOs, executive teams, boards telling me, tell me more about that other option that doesn't entail cutting people and take removing the human from the equation.
Mhm.
The reception is so positive, and it is, I will give you the time. Show me what we could do. How do we do that? And that's what has me the most excited. So now we're developing, I'm partnering with different organizations that are at the forefront of AI, for example, agentic management of agents across different pieces of technology. And how do we bring those together so that they serve the organization, not maybe a particular vendor or a tool or anything like that. So there's a lot of really cool stuff happening, but I guess what I would underline it with for all of us that tend to consume a lot of negative media about what all of this technological advancement means is that there are good intentions and there are strategies that are being designed to be able to counteract some of the darkness that says that humans are going to be replaced by machines, when the reality is that there's another option and it could actually be really cool for each and every one of us.
Well, that is a great ray of sunshine as we wrap up our time together. I want to thank you, Christian, for being here. I want to thank everyone who joined us. We had a fantastic response. We know your time is very valuable, and we do not take it lightly. And our goal is to deliver value as much as we can. So thank you for joining us. We will be having another Leading Well, probably in the spring will be the next one. So keep your eye out for that. And you can always connect with us at the Center for Leadership, lead.fiu.edu. We're on all the socials. We love to hear from you and come to our live events and maybe some of our programs and maybe another Leading Well. So thanks again, Christian, and thank you all for being here. Have a great rest of your day.
Cheers.